Hi everyone, you are listening to She Leads with Carly. Our guest today is Jess Galica, the Director of Strategic Alliances at Mendix and author of Climb Your Own Ladder, Stories of Women Redefining Career Success, which is soon to be released in the coming months. Jess shares the experiences she has working in both a startup and large consulting firm, but most importantly, she shares the value of checking in where your energy lies and the importance of following your passion. We also chat about her upcoming book and her research in career pivots with a gender lens. Specifically, she shares the importance of looking at one's career evolution in the context of women and the difference in the ways women approach career changes compared to men. So interesting. I really enjoyed this episode. I love talking to Jess. Hello, Jess. Thank you so much for joining She Leads today. I'm so excited to have you on this show. So thank you. How are you today?
Hi, Carly. It's great to be here. I love the initiative, and I'm thrilled to be chatting with you today. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm great as well. Thank you. So Jess, you are the Director of Strategic Alliances at Mendix. So even once we get to Mendix in the conversation, I'm going to have you explain it as well. But from my understanding, Mendix is really transforming the way that software applications are developed today. So a leader in the low-code market and really democratizing how apps are developed, which sounds incredible, and I'm excited to hear more. And beyond Mendix, you are also the author of Climb Your Own Ladder, Stories of Women Redefining Career Success, which is supposed to be published around spring, summer of next year. So I'm really excited for that, and we'll talk about that, inspiration behind that and everything. And you also have experience really in partnerships in the education sector, as well as management consulting at Bain. So we'll get through all of that, but really, Jess, thank you for being here. I'm excited to learn from you. And yeah. So Jess, let's jump right into it. I love asking really starting from, college days when take me back to when you're 21, 22 years old. You just graduated from Georgetown. So really at this moment, did you know what you wanted to be when you when you looked at your career? Did you see a path and what were you asking yourself to really navigate your career?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm sure top of mind for all college students and new grads. And the answer for me of did I know what I wanted to do is absolutely not. And I think the process really started for me probably junior year in college when I started to think about, gosh, I need a path after I graduate. And what I realized is that I didn't have one. My undergrad major was in American Studies, which was a very liberal arts and very interdisciplinary major that I loved, but it didn't give me a lot of direction on a clear path to go down. So when I started to get a little bit anxious about what am I doing next, that's when I sort of kicked into high gear and put a plan in place. And that plan for me actually became going to law school. Oh, okay. So I took the LSATs, I applied to law school, and I was headed to Georgetown Law. That was my plan that I had senior year for after graduation. But I decided to defer admission for a year and take a gap year. Okay. And that led me to a really interesting and exciting role working in Central America for two entrepreneurs who were starting an education company. And long story short, that set me on a path to realize that law school actually wasn't for me, and launched me more on this business career that I've been building the last decade or so.
Wow, incredible. So at this moment, you really joined this education startup. And did people say no, Jess, this is very risky, or, law school is more, there's security there, and this is a more, step-by-step path, or what was going on with the outside, and what were they telling you and mentoring you along the way?
Yeah, I think there's always a chorus of voices that you hear from your peers and your family and your network, right? Yeah. And certainly I had that, but I think I had the benefit of having a traditional structured path that I was going down in the form of law school. And that really gave me the freedom to take this year off and not worry about it, frankly. Mm-hmm. So I think because of that, I had the benefit of not having a lot of people, worry or put stress or fears in my mind. And that time in that space, that year when I was working in Central America and Panama, it gave me the space to really think about and reflect, okay, I created this path for myself because I was nervous, frankly, about not having a path. Yeah. But is this really what I want to do? So it was during my year in Panama when I realized, you know what, I think I started this law school journey not for the right reasons. And at the same time, I was starting to get energy and really love the business and entrepreneurial experiences that I was having.
Yeah.
So luckily, I was, able to kind of listen to my own voice during that year, which I think can be a really unique thing because, like you said, there's certainly always everyone around you who has an opinion about what's the right thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. So, okay, so I guess walk me through now being in that education space in Central America. What was next? Did you consider staying in Central America because that you were kind of discovering yourself and new aspects of yourself, or how did you navigate from there going forward?
Yeah, there were parts of working in Panama that I loved and living in Panama that I loved. Yeah. And at the same time, I think I knew that it wasn't going to be the long-term path for me, right? My life was pretty rooted here in the States and back home. Yeah. And so I kind of had a shorter time frame on it. I thought maybe I'll stay for a couple of years. I ended up staying for a little bit over a year. And what I learned in that is that I was working for these two entrepreneurs who were starting an education company that worked with local secondary schools and also helped high school students that were interested in getting their college education in the US. Okay. And this was totally from the ground up. And for me, it was my first real exposure to business. I had never taken, a marketing class or an econ class or a finance class. And I think what I loved is that I was able to really learn about business for the first time. So I was literally Googling what is a marketing plan, right? And learning about the 4 Ps. And then in an entrepreneurial setting, you're able to actually take that learning and put it into action, right? So coming up, with digital marketing materials and flyers and being able to put that into action and actually see the results in the business. So I loved that kind of energy of the business world and in particular kind of the startup world. Yeah. So I knew I didn't want to stay in Central America, and I did know that I wanted to follow this new interest in business and entrepreneurship. So that led me back to the States where I started to look for, again, kind of earlier stage, rapid growth, hyper-scaling companies that would give me that same kind of environment. So I focused my search on that and came back to the Boston area. And that's where I ended up in my next role, which was working for, still in the education sector, but in the technology SaaS space in ed tech company.
I see. Very cool. So Jess, I'm wondering, did you ever consider, you kind of started to develop this entrepreneurial itch and you love the startup idea of just moving fast. Did you ever consider maybe it's me who should start something and I should go on and start my own thing? Or was it more just I want to, be around these incredible people and just help these companies grow and whatnot?
It's a great question. I would say for me, I did not consider becoming a true startup founder. Yeah. I think what I know about myself and what I knew in that moment is that I really loved being the doer. So I loved, kind of embracing the ideas that founders and early stage companies had. Yeah. But I felt that my skill set was better suited to then going and executing and helping to build those companies. But absolutely, I think if I had a real passionate idea or a great concept, maybe I would have gone down that path. But for me, I liked being in the position of sort of being not necessarily the number 2 person, right? But someone that was part of that early small team helping to make the vision a reality.
Definitely. And so, okay, so at this point, when was you got an MBA from MIT, I believe, and so when did this decision come into? Was this after the edtech startup that you joined, and then you decided to get an MBA, or and also why did you choose to pursue an MBA? Because that's obviously, there's a lot of money involved, but it's also incredible. You learn a lot of networking. So what went into that decision?
I got my MBA after I had spent a year in Panama, and then I spent a few years in this ed tech company back in Boston. And I think the MBA decision for me is really rooted in 2 things. The first is that I started to realize the company that I was at, it's a really challenging market. And I saw some writing on the wall in terms of the company's future. And then the second thing is that I had now spent a handful of years personally in these business roles. And yet I had no true business foundation. I had never taken a finance, econ, accounting class, like I said before. And as I looked ahead at the next phase of my career and where I really wanted to be, I felt like having that foundation would be really valuable. So for me, that was the MBA decision. It was pairing all of the awesome learning, scrappy learning that you get in a startup environment, but augmenting that with some of the more structured learning that an MBA offered me.
Yeah.
So that was my plan, and loved Sloan for a lot of reasons. It's kind of a more technical, quantitative program. It's known to have a really down-to-earth and diverse student body, and it was based in Boston, where a lot of my life was. So awesome. I was lucky enough to get accepted there and start the MBA program.
Amazing. That's awesome. And so, and then afterwards, you go into management consulting at Bain. So that's like a very common path. Also, like coming from Stanford, a lot of my friends go into consulting or banking. Like these are just like paths that are just common to go into. So I want to hear your perspective, choosing to go into consulting, and then also your actual experience. Like once you were in there, was this something where you were like, okay, this is a long-term place for me, or was it different than what you expected?
Yeah, absolutely. I can relate to consulting being a really traditional common path, right? When you go into business school, it is one of the most common things that people do after graduating. And there's lots of structured recruiting. There's always a consulting firm on campus trying to meet students. So absolutely, it's sort of an easy path in some ways to fall into. And, for me, I wasn't someone who went into business school hell-bent on getting into one of these top consulting firms. I spent my first year and my first summer, my summer internship, actually working in a non-consulting role. So I had a really great internship in a kind of strategy marketing role out at Apple. Wasn't the right long-term fit for me. So I came back to campus second year, a little bit of a clean slate, starting over. And it was at that point that I really started to consider consulting. I had known about consulting and certainly had learned a lot more in my first year of business school from friends and peers.
Yeah.
And for me, I decided to pursue it because I felt like it was kind of an extension of the MBA. So just like when I was working in these startups, I wanted to get my MBA for this continued learning and training. I really felt the same way about consulting. So oftentimes you'll hear people refer to it as an MBA 2.0.
Yeah.
So that was really my mindset, was this will be another few years where I can continue to learn, push myself, work with amazing clients, work with really talented people. And I just saw it as kind of the most or the fastest way for me to develop professionally for the few years out of the MBA.
Yeah. And so when you consider it now, just advice for, college grad, you went that startup route, but you also have that consulting experience. Do you have an idea now whether one way is the better way, or you gain more from maybe doing the startup and then consulting, or maybe you would have liked to do it the opposite way and, done consulting first and then really understanding, okay, this is how it works. Do you have any take on that?
It's such a good question, and I don't think there's a perfect answer.
Yeah.
And I think everyone that you poll with this question will probably have the bias of telling you that the way that they did it is the best way to do it, because that's what they've known, right? So for me, I do think there's benefit in having been on kind of both sides of the table, so to speak, right? Working for, a well-known brand name management consulting firm and getting all of the amazing experience and training that comes with that. I also do think there's a real benefit in having operator experience, right? And in having that experience of rolling your sleeves up and actually getting stuff done, and having line items on your resume that you can speak to that show real results.
Yeah.
So for me, I do like the fact that I have that combination. And I think that it's kind of unique in the market, right? You tend to find people that go down one path or the other. So I think that has helped me in my career, the ability to credibly speak to both of these different ends of the spectrum.
Awesome.
Now, in terms of my advice for which track is better or which one to do first, I think it really depends on the individual. And I think there's two things that I would keep in mind or encourage people to be asking themselves when they're thinking about what path is right for them.
Yeah.
The first is really checking in with where your energy lies, right? I'm a big believer, and I haven't always been great at practicing what I preach, but I definitely preach that it's, I think, really valuable to try to tap into your authentic energy of what's getting you excited, where are you dedicating and focusing your time, what are you reading about, follow that. If you get way more excited about the startup community or venture capital or innovation hubs within corporate companies, that's telling you something, right? And if you find yourself, obsessing over the consulting boards and forums online and comparing all of the different organizations and how they're unique, then that's telling you something too. So that's my first piece of advice always, is try to tap in and have a good understanding of what lights you up and what gives you energy, and listen to that. And then the second thing is that, to the extent that you can, and it's really hard when you're 20 or 22 years old to know what your long-term plan is. But to the extent that you can formulate a longer-term plan, even 5, 8 years of where you want to be, that can be really informative too, right? If you look at, this is where I want to be in 5 to 8 years, even if you look at job descriptions on LinkedIn, you'll see all the bullets you need, right, for the optimal candidate. And that often helps you to figure out, all right, if I'm here today and I'm trying to get there tomorrow, then what's going to be the quickest, the best, the most productive path to connect those dots? So that would be my advice. Listen to your energy and also try to push yourself to have a longer term point of view. And I think those together can give people a lot more clarity about which path is right for them.
I love it. I think that's so great. And I love the energy advice as well. I think that's so, I think even me starting She Leads, it's very drawn towards what brings me energy, talking to these incredible females and just these leaders. So I think that's, I love that piece of advice. So
absolutely. I totally agree. And I commend you for doing this. And it's great to have something that you've actually produced and a real asset that speaks to what you're passionate about and also shows a ton of your skill set. So totally agree. It's awesome.
Yeah. So, okay, before we get into your book, because I do want to hear just about your book, starting it, the whole story behind it, just tell me about Mendix and your role at Mendix and, how you found it and what makes a good leader in partnerships? What are the skills you need to be an effective leader in strategic alliances?
Yep. So Mendix, as you said at the outset, is a leader in the low-code market. So this is a new way to develop software applications using visual-based programming instead of traditional languages like Java or .NET for the developers out there.
Yeah.
It's a really exciting market. We're seeing a ton of growth, and you also, if you're in the space, are seeing headlines from some of the biggest tech companies in the world, like Amazon, Salesforce, Google, who are all entering or expanding in the market. So it's a really, really hot space. And that's initially what drew me to Mendix was the market potential itself.
Yeah.
And I was also drawn to Mendix because of the role that I would have, which is, so I'm the director of strategic alliances, and I'm building out the company's first partnership relationships with big consulting firms. So name brand firms like Deloitte, Capgemini, PwC, who help get Mendix into the hands of more clients and also help deliver services for those clients to make sure they're successful. So I loved the market and the company, and I loved the idea of being the first one to come in and really build out this function for the company. Amazing. Now, in terms of partnerships, what you need to do to be successful or what really comprises the role, there's lots of different kinds of partnerships that you can find in companies. But I think across all partnerships roles, there's probably 3 big buckets of work that you're doing. And as a result, 3 big skill sets or 3 big things that I think help you be a really great partnership or alliance manager. Yeah. The first one, I think, is having a really strategic mindset and being able to business plan. The foundation of any partnership is that there's a business value happening on both sides of the table, right? So my partners certainly are delivering value to Mendix, but I also need to understand and be able to build and articulate a business case for how that partnership will benefit them on the other end. So I think having those abilities, those really core fundamental business planning and business case skills is really important and fundamental.
Nice.
The second one is probably obvious, which is relationship building. You obviously, on the other side of the table, it's a person who's there. And so building a relationship with the people and counterparts that you work with is really critical. And of course, there's business elements that ground every partnership, but you can't forget that it's also a human transaction. And people want to work with people who are good to work with and also make their life easy. So there's a lot of sort of customer success mentality and relationship building that goes into maintaining those partnerships.
Awesome.
And then the last one for partnerships, what it's all about is really, I think, cross-functional leadership within the company. So across Mendix, for me to build out these partnerships, I need to rely on a lot of other teams. So I'm constantly working with our sales team, with our marketing team, with our legal team for negotiations and contracts. And so I think someone who is successful in a partnership management role is someone who loves working cross-functionally with all those different groups and who also has an ability to influence those groups and kind of get what you need from them without necessarily having that formal reporting line, since you're cutting across the entire organization.
Amazing.
So it's an awesome role. Strategy, relationships, cross-functional work within the company. I'm enjoying it a lot, and that's what I'd say are the big pieces for anyone considering that similar path.
Yeah, I love it. I think this is so great because I also haven't talked to, a leader in partnerships, in strategic alliances. So I think it's just so interesting to really tap into, from an internal perspective, which is so great. So Jess, tell me now about this book that you are writing. Really, what inspired you to start this book and what's been the process like?
Yeah, so the book is really born out of my own career journey. And the book itself looks at the intersection of career and gender. And more specifically, it looks at women who have made bold career changes, leaving a more traditional career path to climb their own ladder, as the title suggests, right?
Yeah.
And it was born out of my own interest. I think, when I was working in consulting, I knew that this was not the forever thing for me. It was such a great experience and I value it significantly. And at the same time, I knew I'm not going to be in consulting forever. And I really kind of woke up, I think, over a decade into my career and thought, gosh, I haven't been thinking a whole lot about what I really want out of my career. I've been following these paths that are very validated by, prestigious brand names and successful roles as other people define them. But I haven't taken a whole lot of time to kind of check in with me about what I really want in my career.
Yeah.
And so it spawned this belief that, I think there's going to be something different that I'm doing moving forward. And I started to have some networking calls with women to understand how they had made big changes in their career. And that led to a much bigger project, which all of a sudden it was, dozens of formal interviews with women, really just loving hearing their stories and all the things that I learned from them as women had figured out everything from the very beginning of how do I know what I want to do, down to the actual execution of changing a career and saying goodbye to a really stable path and starting something new.
Yeah.
So it was really rooted in my personal discovery and journey of figuring out, what do I want to do when I grow up? Mm-hmm. And some awesome research that spun out from there. I've now interviewed over 24 women to hear their stories, and it's been an awesome experience to reflect those in the book. And I'll be publishing next spring, summer, like you mentioned. So finishing revisions through the end of the year and then kicking off some promotional activities in 2021.
Oh, I'm so excited to read it. I think this will be so great. And so before we get to fun questions, Jess, I'm wondering, in this process where you are now with the book, what would you say is like the biggest takeaway or lesson you learned, interviewing these incredible women who've pivoted their career, and yeah, what's been a great takeaway?
There have been a ton of great takeaways, but I'll talk about two. I think the first takeaway is the importance of looking at career changes and career evolution, which, by the way, in today's modern career, I think it's no surprise that career change is inevitable, right? The old career of staying in a role for 2 decades is totally gone. So we need to get on board with career changing, pivoting, switching, whatever you want to call it. But the biggest takeaway from my research has been the importance of looking at career changes in the context of gender. There's a ton of thought leadership out there around how to successfully prepare or execute a career switch. But there's really little thought leadership on how to do it specifically as a woman. And consistently in my interviews and consistently in lots of research on gender and career, there are so many reasons that it's important to take that lens of not just career changing, but career changing and gender. Wow. Women approach career changes in different ways. We tend to be more cautious and many times more self-critical. We also prepare for career changes very differently. We want to check off every single box before we make a jump from one career to the next step. Which is a very different mentality and way that men often approach their careers. And we face a lot of different external perspectives, biases, discrimination that are unique to women. And those are exacerbated as well for women of color, Black women, LGBTQ women. And so it's so critical to be aware of some of these factors that play into what it means to pivot in your career as a female. Yeah. And I'm really happy and proud that the book is focusing space on that dialogue specifically.
So cool.
So that's the first takeaway, just the importance of looking at gender and career changing. Yeah. And the second one is, I love to say that this book is not another checklist. So I think just like there's a lot of thought leadership on career changing, most of that thought leadership really focuses on a checklist that you have to do in order to be successful, right? There's the 4-step program from this author. There's the 5-stage cycle from another author. I really believe that women in particular, we've been receiving and checking off enough boxes and enough checklists in our life. That is not what women need to thrive and succeed. Yeah. I am very confident that once women know where they want to go, they will check off every single box that they need to in order to get there. I think instead of this checklist mentality, and another piece of advice for women to follow, instead what women need, I think, is really to see the stories of peers and inspiring women who are in the places or have made the changes that they want to make. So I'm also really proud that the book is rooted in those stories, right? So my hope for the book is that every reader, and particularly female readers, will see themselves in the stories of other women, and that will help them to clarify the next chapter of the story that they want to write for their own life and their own career.
I love it, Jess. That sounds so incredible. So, okay, last question. What is a fun or weird talent that you have that no one really knows about? So I'm going to go real quick. I'll show you mine. So mine's blueberry throwing. All right, here we go. Okay. It was a success.
You did it.
I did it.
Do you have a 100% success rate with that?
It's a little bit lower. The beginning was a little bit rough, but we're getting better. So now it's pretty good.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, hidden talent question. I've got a love-hate relationship with this question. I love seeing fun hidden talents like yours, Carly.
Yeah.
And then for me, I think, gosh, I need a more unique or cool hidden talent. I think I've got a few. So the first kind of more pragmatic one is that I speak Spanish, which a lot of people in my life today don't know because it's been over a decade since I've really used it. But I can still get by pretty well speaking Spanish, which is actually a valuable hidden talent.
Love it.
slightly less valuable hidden talent is that my family is a pretty competitive, puzzling, Scrabble family. And I am proud to say that I'm the reigning Scrabble champion.
I love it.
I don't know if that would hold up if I went outside of my family, but I'll take the family title.
Yeah, that's great.
And then the last one, maybe even less valuable or less productive, is that I have, like many people, the hidden talent of being able to consume tons of meaningless reality TV. But I think my hidden talent is that I've got a real passion for the reality competition shows. So whether it's a dating show like The Bachelor, or my newest one is a British interior decorating competition. So not only can I binge watch them with great efficiency, but I'm pretty good at picking the winners. So I almost always know who's going to be voted off and who will be moving forward.
That is pretty cool. I think that's pretty valuable in a way. I like that. Okay, yeah, Jess. Thanks. Well, thank you so much for joining She Leads. I've loved it. I've learned so much, and I'm just excited for others to learn from you as well. So it's been so great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks, Carly. Loved being here and chatting with you.
Of course.